Hey there, we're talking about solar. We're talking about solar on farms. We're talking about solar farms. We're talking about a very controversial topic in this episode of the Business of Agriculture.
Hey, Damian Mason here with a question before we hop into this episode of the Business of Agriculture. If you farm for a living, you employ a lot of amazing technology, from your inputs that you put into the soil to the tractor that you sit in, your combine, and the amazing data that it harvests. But has your soil analytics kept up technologically with everything else in your farming operation? I would venture to say that no, it is not. Sure, you check for your nitrogen, your phosphorus, or potassium, your micronutrients as well, but what about disease pressure? Do you know what diseases and what pests you're going to face next year? No, you don't, but you can now figure that out with Pattern Ag's predictive analytics. Think about it. They can tell you now with testing what the likelihood of facing nasty diseases, things like cyst nematode or sudden death syndrome, what the likelihood of you having this in your field. Then you know how to prepare, how to treat, and where to invest your money. It's using technology to make you bigger yields and therefore make you bigger money. Go to www.pattern.ag to learn more. They are pioneering the way in predictive agronomy.
Hey, welcome to another fantastic episode of the Business of Agriculture. I've got John Carroll, returning guest. He's been on a couple of times before. He's with Carroll Family Farms in Carthage, Illinois. Sharp dude. That's why he's returning. I like having him on here. He's an unemotional guy. He doesn't get too emotional about things. He's very business-minded. You might remember he was on here before. We talked about the right-of-way, or shall we say eminent domain issue, things like carbon pipelines or electrical or solar, whatever. I'm sorry. And now we're talking about solar on this episode. He farms between Illinois and Brazil. We had another episode. We talked about that, farming in two hemispheres. Now we're talking about solar. Okay, it's very controversial if it's going across the road from you. It creates a lot of passion. I will just go ahead and divulge. I am anti-solar because generally I think it bastardizes farm economics. It is propositioned based on legislation. And that's the problem that I have with it. However, so is ethanol. There's a lot of things that are legislatively enacted that then end up distorting some farm economics. So there is some controversy. Usually it's about whether you want to have solar across the road from you. It's happening here in Huntington County, Indiana. There's a lot of fight going on about farms being converted to solar. But the point is, there's money being made, and this is still, after all, the Business of Agriculture show, and agriculture is a business. John Carroll is going to talk about his solar developments that he has done, and also proposals that he is working on right now. So you've got solar on your farm, and you might have more. Talk to me.
Yeah, that's right. So we started probably 5 or 6 years ago with our first solar projects, and this was for on-farm use. So we're using the electricity that we produce. And we began with, these are based in the state of Illinois, and at the time, and still in the state of Illinois, they have an Illinois program called the SREC program, which incentivizes solar in the state, and many times covers, depending on the size of the project, maybe a third of the cost of the project. That project continues today, and so we continue to add additional solar and just getting into smaller and smaller projects. We've already done the bigger, easier stuff for our own farm. So a couple things to think about. First we'll talk about on-farm solar for your own use, and then we'll talk about community solar or putting in solar for use by creating.
Okay, so on the on-farm thing, I want to make sure that the listener kind of discerns the difference here, John. That I think there's more of that happening in Illinois because your state has sweetened the pot more through tax and credits to put, if you have hog barns or a dairy facility or something, a grain setup that uses a lot of electricity, you get a certain amount of tax credit from the state to put in solar panels that feed that on-farm demand use. Like I said, call it a hog barn, dairy setup, grain setup, whatever. I don't think that many other states have as rich of an incentive as Illinois does. That's my read.
They do not, but I don't want to underplay the federal incentives because that has changed recently. And we had federal incentives in place for a 30% tax credit on any renewable energies. And then that started to stair step down 28%, 26%. But then the Inflation Reduction Act came out and reset that to 30 and then put in some additional bonuses on it. So any renewable energy project for, I think it's through 2032, gets an automatic 30% federal tax credit. But on top of that, we have, if the renewable energy products are built in the United States, you get a 10% adder. A certain percentage of it has to be built in the United States. If you are in a low income community, is a 10% adder. And those are maps you can find online to figure out if you are or not. And it might just be one side of the road is and one side isn't. They had to draw a line somewhere. So that's their 10%. And then they have these energy communities. So these are counties or areas that maybe used to have coal or fossil fuels, or they're close to one of those counties, or they have electricity that came from one of those sources. It's another 10% adder. So you're talking this federal tax credit, it might be up around 50%. So you get 50% of the project paid for by the federal government, assuming you can use the tax credits, right? And tax credits, I believe, go back a year, forward 7 years. So a lot of opportunity.
Now, to the person listening to this, remember, we have a lot of people that listen to this from all different backgrounds, and they might be saying, wait a minute, tax credit, point out, we're going back to economics and some financials here. Tax credit means the money that you spend, if you spent $500,000 developing the solar thing, and John is saying you can get a 50% tax credit. What that means is 50% of that cost, that would be $250,000, assuming you spent $500,000 developing this. $250,000 you then apply toward taxes owed. So a lot of farms don't pay a lot of income taxes because they use depreciation, they buy things, etc. So there are farming operations that would take a long time to burn through a tax credit if they don't have a lot of tax obligation. That's a true statement, yes?
That's true. A lot of farmers use their cash basis taxpayers. They use that to lower their tax liability, and then sometimes buy things they don't need in order to pay less taxes. Right? Yeah. Buy a new piece.
Yeah. The old story is, we had a big year. We're at the John Deere dealership with a check to write cash for a combine because we want to get this money off our books and use this as expense. So yes, there's always that thing of, I'm going to spend a whole bunch of money to avoid paying taxes, and I'm going to do it the week of Christmas. Yeah.
Yep. So here's an alternative, right? You can go ahead and recognize some of that income, and then you've got tax credits to use to offset the income tax.
And like you said, the tax credit has a play in time, meaning you can go back a year and you can also go forward like as much as 7 years. So if in this example, if you spent $500,000 putting in a solar field to feed your hog operation or your grain setup, 250 of that doesn't need to be burned up this year. You can use it. You can apportion it. 250 spread out over, say, 7 or 8 years. So which in rough numbers is $60,000 a year you could use, or $50,000 a year, or something like that, $40,000 a year. Yeah. Right.
That's right. And then we've got, well, of course, the state of Illinois and some other states have their own state incentives, right? Like I said, in the state of Illinois, it's around 30% of the cost of the project comes back to you in the form of this, what's called an SREC credit. And then on top of that, there's another federal program, which is the REAP program. Yeah. So these cover a percentage of project costs up to $1 million. You hire a grant writer for a couple $1,000, and they put the numbers together. It goes into a scoring system, and many people are able with solar to be able to get a federal tax credit, to get a grant from the federal government. So you sum those things up, you can really get down to covering most of the cost of a project.
Sure. So this, first off, that's fantastic. It assumes that you have a use of the tax credit, which means you actually have to have income.
Right.
And that also assumes that you can use the electricity. This is for on-farm usage. This is not the stuff that's getting everybody all pissed off, that's running around with signing petitions. So we're talking about on-farm use. So like the guy that I rent my farm ground to has 3 dairy facilities.
Yep.
He would be able to use something like this because he has a tremendous electric consumption demand on his dairy facility because, the milkers are running, 23
Yep.
hours a day, et cetera, et cetera. So it assumes, or a grain setup or what have you. Besides that, are you allowed to, is it feed your house also? Just out of curiosity?
You cannot feed if you're going to do a grant project, it can't be feeding residential.
Purely agricultural.
Purely agricultural.
So in your case, you have hog setups and grain setups.
That's right. Feed
In
mill.
shop, I guess.
Right.
That's where your electric goes.
Yeah. And then the other consideration there is who's your electrical provider. So if you're an electrical co-op, net metering is uncommon. So what net metering means is you produce electricity. If you overproduce what you need at any moment, you feed back into the grid, and then you're able to bank that and use it later. Okay. Many electrical co-ops do not have that. So it only makes sense to size a unit for what you use, for what you're actually pulling off. So at nighttime, we are unable to produce solar energy, right? We have to buy from the grid. It doesn't make sense to overbuild your unit, feed into the grid during the day, and pull it back at night because your co-ops don't do that. Now, if you're on a utility like here in Illinois, we have Ameren. They do net metering. Those really, really work well.
Yeah. So what? Yeah, you're meaning that basically it means I produce more energy than I can use at noon, but at midnight I'm producing no energy, but it ends up coming back and forth. I give them energy at noon. They give me it back at midnight. You said that like a rural cooperative like I'm on doesn't have the sophistication, and we're not being mean. It's just they don't have the sophistication of metering to do it that way. So what happens then? You're producing more than you can use at noon, and then at midnight you're buying electric, or do you have to battery it?
No. So you just don't build it big enough that you are feeding back into the grid. You have to undersize. You're basically undersizing, and you recognize that you're maybe only going to cover half of your solar costs, offset half of your electrical usage with solar, and you're still going to be buying from the grid.
Got it. Interesting. All right. I want to hear also then about then the money on that, and we're getting so much more. Before I get into that, I'll talk about my friends at Redox. Redox became a sponsor here in 2024. Awesome people. Darren Moon founded this company 30 years ago. They're out in Burley, Idaho, but you know what? Their products work everywhere. They began in specialty crops and turf, and now they're becoming more and more broad acre products. They have a product lineup that can help you maintain your plant charge balance. Every plant takes up nutrients, all of which have an electrical charge, either positive or negative. Your plants will do whatever is needed to have an even balance of positive and negative. If a grower fertility program creates an uneven charge balance, your plants will be stressed. They will then obviously have to work hard, and then they'll sacrifice yield. So why don't you buy Redox Bionutrients products and put them in your cropping mix? They combine 13 key carbon chemistries that biostimulants to achieve plant charge balance. With 30 years in business, Redox has a great track record of helping farmers just like you. Find out more at redoxgrows.com. Okay. You essentially then build an undersized solar facility to feed your hog facility, hog builds, hog bartings, your shop, whatever. And then you're still buying electricity.
That's right. If you're on a rural co-op. Now, we do have sites that are on a utility, and then you can build a size for what you're going to use for an entire year, right? Like you're going to produce enough in a 12-month period to offset all your electrical usage in a 12-month period. Those work really well. So think about people with grain drying that don't do much else the rest of the year, but they use a lot of electricity September, October. So they can build a small unit, generate power all year, feed it back into the utility, and then September, October, they use all that up.
Yeah, and like you said, they're basically, it's net metering. So all that juice on a sunny January day, they don't need it. They run the fans a couple of days in January. They don't need that, but their big demand is paid for. You're saying that some of your facilities are where it's a larger company, like here it'd be Duke Energy, as opposed to the United RMC or whatever they might call it, the RMs, the Rural Electric Cooperative. So in your places that are rural cooperatives where they don't have net metering, you essentially are buying electricity. So you've had to think about where you put these facilities in, because sometimes it makes more sense. The tax credits, the grants, that all works. But then the secondary decision economically, financially, is where do I put this where I get my bigger bang for my buck?
Yeah, that's right. So I think anybody would say you want to start off at, if you're on like a Duke, right? That makes the most sense. And then after that are your sites that are on a co-op. But either way, I mean, these are the best ROI investments in the last 5 years that we've made on the farm. I mean, because of if you can use the tax credits, right? If you have taxable income, if you have tax liability, there's nothing with a higher ROI that we've had.
Yeah, and like you said, we make the crack about farmers. And I used to, in my comedy set, I used to do a whole thing about these farmers do anything they can to avoid paying taxes. Well, the reality is, if you're a farmer of any size, to come up with $50,000 a year of tax liability isn't that hard to do, when you figure what you're selling. Maybe not this year with commodity prices being down, et cetera. So if you, in the hypothetical example that we use, and I don't know, but I'm thinking $500,000, surely God will build a solar setup to feed a grain and hog operation,
Sure.
right? Won't it?
Yep. Right.
Yeah. So, you're not talking about as much as we might think. So what about then the scope of these things? You've now had them in the last 5 years. When did this get good? When did this incentive get good? This REAPS and this USDA and then the state of Illinois in the last three, right?
Yeah. So Illinois, when we started 5 or 6 years ago, all this stuff was in place, both Illinois and the 30% federal tax credit. But the federal tax credit started to ratchet down until the Inflation Reduction Act came out, brought it back up to 30, and added these other bonus tax credits that we talked about earlier. The Illinois SREC program's been in play all along.
Okay. So like you said, the bulk of it, if I'm not in Illinois, if I'm in Indiana, which I am, I don't think the incentives are quite as good. So I probably, though, could get around 50% paid for with the USDA, and then some of those other ones about low energy or low, what do we call them? Low income or whatever, those kinds of things, right?
Right. And then there's also, even if you don't qualify for any of those, you always get the 30% federal tax credit just because renewable energy, and you can still apply for the USDA grant, for a REAP grant. And you don't have to, you can purchase, like you can sign up, do the project, but not build it, make it contingent upon grant approval, for example. And then, the numbers are fantastic, right? If you get the grant approval, and your federal tax credit. So, it's pretty low risk, pretty easy. It does, you're talking about only having probably a couple $1,000s in a project between getting the grants written and some work on the ground to understand how viable, get the numbers together.
Okay, we're going to talk about on-farm, and eventually I want to go talk about the ones that you sell to the grid, which you're in negotiations on that also. And that's the one that gets everybody all up in arms. But before we do that, how hard is it to get this done? I mean, did entities come to you and say, you got a hog farm over here, you've got a shop and a grain handling facility over here, or did you have to go and hunt this down? How'd it happen?
I think I just read about it in a farm magazine or something and reached out to a local electrical supplier, who sells panels, and then they knew some installers, and we ended up working with a Tri-State Energy is the name of just a local installer, and they came out and did all of the ground, did all the legwork. Oftentimes these come with, say, a 5-year. The installer is going to be responsible for any maintenance, any problems in the first 5 years.
Yeah.
And then the solar panels generally have a 20 to 25 year warranty, manufacturer warranty on it.
Now, by the way, I love it when people say that. When somebody told me it's guaranteed for life, and I always say, whose life?
Yeah.
Mine, yours, or this LLC that you set up that could go away with the next year of legal filings that you don't put together. Who's allegedly warranting these solar panels?
That's right. So I think you want to be careful about that, and you want to, I think, two things. You want to first look at who's behind it, who is this warrant, who's actually giving the warranty on this thing. And you can do your best there, right? But any company can go under.
Yeah, right.
So then I think
I got a warranty from Ford Motor Company, General Motors, whatever. Hell, if it wasn't for the federal government, General Motors should have been out of business twice. So yeah, I get you. So a warranty is only as good as we got that.
But I think you can make it a little better by, if you have a large, these panels are going to be sold through some kind of supplier, right? And some of these are quite large, multi-state, large companies have been around a long time. And I have found that they have been willing to back up that warranty on their own balance sheet, because they're so certain about the future of the manufacturer and the quality of the solar panels. So you may be able to get somebody else to stand behind it as well as a backup.
So getting it done, you didn't have any problem. You found a contractor and all that, and then there's permits from the county, probably.
Some counties require them, some don't.
Okay, how big? For instance, you've got multiple of these, right?
Yeah, we've done 8 different projects.
Okay, so on average, across the 8, how big of a footprint are we talking about? The size of a football field?
No, not that big. So if you're talking about, let's say a hog barn, like a 2,500 head finishing barn would be a common size across the Midwest. You're only talking about covering maybe a third of one side of the roof. So 1/6 of the roof.
Are they on the roof?
We have some on the roof, and we have some ground mounts as well.
Yeah, they want ground mounts because they're easier to install and get to, right?
That's right. Sometimes, but we kind of figured if you've only got, there is some risk with putting them on the roof. What if the roof metal goes bad, and then you're into taking those off to replace it? But if you're only covering 1/6 of the roof with it, it's not that big of a deal either.
It's interesting. So on those, you're not talking, I used the hypothetical number of $500,000. You're talking way less than that for those.
Right. Way less than that for those.
Like 50 to 100 grand?
Right.
Yeah. And almost none of that was really out of pocket after the incentives, et cetera.
Right.
All right. And we're going to move on now to the one that everybody's mad about. I've been recruited to be involved in this on both sides in my home county here about taking an entire field and putting it into panels. That's the one that everybody wants to hear about. And here's the deal, John. It creates a tremendous amount of emotion. I understand that. It also could create a tremendous amount of revenue. So my reasons why I have not gotten involved in it, I'm going to share with you in a moment. Then I want to hear from you, because you are currently in negotiations right now about taking an entire field and putting in solar panels to be sold onto the grid for electric power. Let's talk about Truterra real quick. We talk about revenue. We're talking about per acre. We're talking about the fact that commodity prices are down. I just was listening to Ag Radio on my drive yesterday to a speaking engagement in Illinois, his home state, and listen to all kinds of ag radio driving, and we're talking about corn, $3.76. We're talking about beans in the $9 and something range. The point is, you're going to struggle for revenue. Why don't you diversify your revenue streams? You can do that with a sustainability program, and Truterra can help. Truterra is focused on supporting you, a farmer, at every stage of your sustainability journey. You can make, maintain, and create a regenerative program that has economic and environmental benefits. The point is, a sustainability program can help you add diversification of revenue. Maybe you get $20, $30, $40 per acre. I don't know. You can find out. Go to TruterraAg.com and find out. Truterra Ag, they're part of Land O'Lakes. Been around for more than 100 years. Go check it out. TruterraAg.com. You're talking about sustainability programs that pay and can help you when things are not so good economically on the revenue side and farming. All right. So you are in the mix. I've been recruited on both sides of it. I got friends that are in the deal, leasing their property for solar panels. I have friends that live across from it and hate it and want me to get involved on both sides. And I said, here's why I won't. Legislatively, you're talking about opposing someone's ability to make money. You know, it's hard to make money, and it's hard to make money in agriculture. If someone's going to give you 3, 4, 10 times cash rent rates, and your neighbor's going to keep you from doing that, that doesn't seem right to me. I understand. I don't want to look out and see solar panels. My wife says, I wouldn't want to look out and see solar panels on our farm. I said, I understand, but there's the financial aspect of this. The reality is projects are going in. It's happening more here where you are and I are in the Midwest because of population. They're not putting these in the panhandle of Oklahoma, which arguably they get more sunshine there. Probably should put them there, but they know population out there. So they got no demand for electricity. Am I right? And then tell me your experience.
Yeah, you're right. There's more sunshine. There's less people. And then this goes back to our earlier podcast about transmission, right? If you're going to produce it out in Oklahoma, then you've got to get it to where the people are. And there are a lot of difficulties around getting transmissions lines to run through people's farms across multiple states.
And also there's line loss.
That's right.
Meaning that the electricity you get, if you generate this in Guyman, Oklahoma, and you've got to get to, Guyman, Oklahoma, there's my friend Galen, I know, if you're listening to this, Galen Beer with AgroLiquid, I know, I always use you as an example, but I think there's more people in my kitchen right now than live in Guyman, Oklahoma. The point is that they've got to get that electricity to somewhere. So you're going to have resistance. We all took electric class. Maybe we didn't. You're going to lose a bunch of what you generate there. And also you've got to run power lines across 2 Indian reservations and, 50 million acres of land to get it to where the nearest population center is. So that's why it seems like this is more of I'm hearing about solar panels here in Indiana, Illinois, where there's people and closer to the connection.
Yeah, that's right. And even if you are in a populated area or a state that needs a lot of electricity, you still need to be close to a power line that has size or a substation in order to take on a larger project that's going to feed back into the grid. And that is not the case for most farms are not. And the cost to take this power and then transmit it across other people's fields or just even across your own field, if you're going a mile or two, it's like really expensive to do this kind of work and get it to a substation or to a larger line. So a lot of farms simply can't be used for it because they're not on a high voltage line. So that means the ones that are of higher value, right? They're getting bid up for because it's not all the farms that can do it. It's just these ones. So there's 2 different kinds of these projects you see going in. There's community solar, which as I understand it is it's like a one-time thing for a community. Produce the power that's needed for a specific community. This is not getting distributed widely. It's not getting sent off to a big city. It's just being used locally. There are for the developers on these projects, there are some really big subsidies, I believe, that go into it. And that's why they're paying so much for them. These are the highest paid ones you see. And I'll just repeat here, numbers I've seen in farm magazines about these. And I believe that these are accurate numbers. You're talking $2,000 to $3,500 an acre for these community solar projects on their lease.
By the way, this is the second time you referenced farm magazines. You're like 40 years old. I thought farm magazines were read by 80-year-olds. I thought guys like you just walked around looking at their phone all the time. And you reference these farm magazines. Do you actually read paper magazines?
I get the Wall Street Journal on paper and I read it every day. I sit in a big chair and I read the paper. I
get the Wall Street Journal on paper and I get it online, and I don't read it every day. I read it more when I travel, cover to cover. Oh. But yes, I like to actually read paper products myself. My mom used to keep all of her farm magazines, which is interesting. I always tell sponsors, you should sponsor the Business of Agriculture show because I have actual people in ag that are decision makers that listen to this. Mm-hmm. My mom would get a dozen farm magazines per month and then hand them to me because and they were all full of ads. And I'm like, you're an 89-year-old woman. You don't buy anything. You haven't made a farm decision in 50 years. What the hell? And all these ads are all these advertising that are covering, trying to blanket you. Anyway, so farm magazines, yeah, you and I both seen the articles, and that seems a little heavy. I have not heard as much as $2,500 or $3,500 an acre, but you're saying for a lease for solar, you're saying, but that has a community tie-in, meaning it's supposed to feed that jurisdiction right next to the field, within a mile of the field.
That's right. So it's got to be right next to the community, and it's a one-time thing that gets built out for that community. And then you've got the commercial solar projects. So these are the real big ones you see, right? Yeah. These are the ones that can be thousands of acres. They must be on a high voltage line, and they need to be connected. They need to be getting somewhere, right? They need to be going to someplace with large demand. So you see these going up for server farms, as you think about the AI and the increased electricity usage there, or off to a city. Many times the solar, the power off of these is going to be sold on a long-term contract to a Microsoft or a Google or large city.
Yeah.
These are like,
it doesn't even have to be tied to a large, it doesn't have to be tied to a Google or an Amazon. In other words, the ones going in here is just going to go on the grid, I think. I mean, it's just going to the power. I mean, it's going to ultimately go to all those companies, right?
It can be that way, but you see a lot of these companies that have made these promises of net zero by 2030. And so they want to be able to show specifically that their power is coming from a renewable source.
Right.
So that's where you see some of that happening.
By the way, still some of that is a lot of foggy bullshit. I was watching the Super Bowl several years ago, and Anheuser-Busch commercial comes on, and it said that all of Anheuser-Busch brewery products were brewed using this net zero renewable energy. And I'm like, bullshit. Your facility that brews beer in whatever town Jacksonville, St. Louis, whatever, that power comes in on a power line, and you can't tell me that this little kilowatt, wait, unplug the cord over there, Larry. What? That kilowatt that's getting ready to come in here to feed our fermenter came from a coal. Unplug the power line. Okay, now plug it back in. Those kilowatts that are coming down the line all came from windmills. There's a lot of fuzz. There's a lot of fudge, and let's face it. Once electricity is running into your electrical outlet, it doesn't know where it came from.
That's right. It's not the specific electron, right, that comes to you. But we talked about the SREC credits in the state of Illinois. Well, because for all of us that participate in that program, we are not allowed to say that we use renewable energy on our farm, right? Even though we're feeding directly into our meter.
Right.
You're not allowed to say that. We've actually sold that. We've sold those to someone else. So that's how the SREC program is, that some of the funding there comes from somebody else who wants to say they're using renewable energy. And so they have paid. That made it viable for us to put it up. We don't get to say we use renewable, and they do.
So it doesn't matter. You're not in a consumer-facing business, but yeah, I'm sitting here drinking a Coca-Cola. These guys want to be able to tell their customer base, or those that actually care about such things, we use only renewable energy to make Coca-Cola. And so they're paying for that right for branding, for marketing.
Yep. Right.
Okay. All right. So let's talk some more about these things. You used a big number. Like I said, you said that $2,500 to $3,500. The numbers I'm hearing are $1,000 per acre, maybe as much as $1,500 per acre, which in this part of the world would be 3 to 5 times cash rental rates, let's say, depending on your soil type, et cetera, which is still a hell of a paycheck. And so the landowner, most of whom are farmers, how do you turn that down?
Yeah, so that was, we talked first about community solar, but this is the commercial solar, right? And those are the numbers, $1,000 to $1,500 an acre is commonly.
Is that the number? I mean, wait. I live in an area where the ground is worth about $12,000 an acre. You are in Illinois, so your ground is worth $50 or $1 million an acre, depending on what the latest auction sells for. So anyway, I'm using my numbers. Is that the number over there? If a commercial solar was going to go in Carthage, Illinois, would they put a rental rate out there, a lease rate of $1,000, $1,500 per acre?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. You didn't even dispute that when I said that the land over there is worth $50 to $1 million an acre. You didn't even dispute that.
Let's say what's Buffett say? Price is what you pay and value is what you get. So yes, our price is $50 to $100 million an acre or something. But
what is the latest land sale near you fetching?
I think come off the tops, and instead of seeing as many deals in the 20, in the low 20s on prime ground, you see it in the
18,
upper teens. Yeah.
18 grand gets an acre. Okay. Back to this commercial thing. It looks like it's got legs. I think it's going to keep up. I think we're going to continue to have these things happen. Now, they get disputed. Like I said, the one here in Huntington County, next county over Wells County, there's a dispute about this. I think the ball is rolling. First off, and that's the other thing, that a lot of the people are fighting it. I'm like, all right, well, guess what's going to happen? You're going to oppose it at the township level or at the county level. And all of a sudden, these entities, whether they are the green energy people, are going to go to the state houses in Springfield, Illinois, and Indianapolis, Indiana, Columbus, Ohio, wherever it should be. And they're going to say, you know what? You think that legislation cannot be bought and paid for? There's enough federal incentive for this that I kind of tell my county people, you can go and fight this all you want. But guess what? You're going to end up happening. The state level is going to end up being influenced by federal level and say, we're all about green energy. Look at what's happening. What's Vilsack, the Secretary of Agriculture? He talks about climate smart agriculture. They're all about the green thing. You think that doesn't trickle down? So you can oppose it all you want in Huntington County, Indiana, but trust me, this is going to end up getting to where then these companies just go to the state level and say, money talks. Pass a state law. You cannot oppose solar development in the state of Indiana. That's where I think it's going to happen. That's why these things are coming.
I mean, ours has been the state of Illinois, right? Which was obviously early on, along with California and some of these other states.
There's more opposition. There's more opposition that I see at the local level. Maybe there is in Illinois also, but I'm telling you that it's futile.
I agree with you. I think we need to try to be moving with a government tailwind instead of against it.
Local resistance, in my opinion, against solar is futile because all the companies are, between the federal push, the government at the federal level, and the green agenda. And then these power companies, not to mention the money from things like the Inflation Reduction Act, they're just going to circumvent local governments all day long. And then all of a sudden at the state level, they say, okay, you little bumpkins in Huntington that are opposed to this, you're not allowed to. You cannot oppose solar development at the county level. Boom. And then it's done. Now it's a state level or a federal level thing.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think, it's how you started off the podcast on, I don't like our big government deficit. I don't like that there's all these subsidies involved with the solar. But if you're a farmer using subsidized crop insurance or selling your corn for
ethanol,
for ethanol and getting an extra $1 a bushel out of it compared to what you would have we not had ethanol, right. You participate in it, right? And
yeah. So at some point, we've got to admit that as much as we don't like to, this is the game that we're forced to play. And also, let's not pretend that, like you just said, if you use crop insurance or you sell corn for ethanol, if you sell corn, period, if you grow corn, 40% right. of the ethanol corn crop goes to ethanol. That's all predicated on legislation.
Yep.
That invented the ethanol thing and invented crop insurance.
Yep, I agree.
Well, this is the next thing. So on the commercial grade solar thing, I think it caps out. I think it's futile to try and resist it, but I think it caps out. We're not going to see solar on half the farm acres. I mean, my God, there's not enough demand for it. Where does it cap out?
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think I think the wind and all the stuff we talked about so far can all be applied to wind as well, right? The wind farms, and we're actually working right now on the project of putting up a wind turbine for our own use on our farm, because it combines pretty well with solar in that you're producing oftentimes during cloudy days, during the nighttime, right? And so I do believe that solar caps out because we just don't need that much energy just when the sun's shining, right? So we need, but I do believe it continues on with additional wind projects to add renewables during other times of the day.
Yeah. So on the solar thing, on these lease rates, I've actually wondered why they're throwing such big numbers out there. I think you could get the lease done for 3 times market rate compared to cash rent for farming purposes. I don't know that you need to go to 7 and 10 times. Am I right?
So I think especially when you think about community solar or large project, there is a mad rush by the developers, because there's only going to be so many of these things, and there's only so many places they can be put. And I think you really have to keep your eye out for speculators as opposed to real developers, because they'll come in and throw around these big numbers. But actually, all you're signing up for is you're giving them an option to develop during a time period, during their development period, which is often, could be 2 or 3 years long.
Yeah.
And you're paying a small, you hear $20 an acre or something.
So for the option period, as they call it.
For the option period.
Like my friends that are landowners, John, have gotten like $50 an acre for 2.5 years for the option period. And that's when the alleged solar developer, the entity that's giving you the money, is getting their ducks in a row, whether it's the local improvement or the approval, I should say, permitting, negotiations with the power company, whatever. But I've also got a guy that I know who did that, and he got money for 2.5 years during the option period, and it just expired because the solar development never happened.
That's right. And so the idea for the option period, exactly what you said, this is while they're getting their permits and get everything lined up, getting their ducks in a row. But there are also out there that are simply speculators who are paying a small amount, $25-$50 an acre for the option. They really don't have a pathway to getting this energy sold or getting the project done, but they're getting the land tied down, and then they're going to go out and see if they can get the rest of it put together, see if they can actually find somebody who will pay $1,500 an acre, and they're going to act as a middleman in it. So you get a lot of these offers out there, but you really want to work back through who's the money behind this, who's actually the one doing the project, and do they have legs, right? Have they done this before? Have they had success in other areas? And stay away from the speculators.
Yeah, the speculators. And the thing is, it's not that they're not going to pay you the option. It's just that they may or may not be able to bring this thing to fruition, right?
That's right. Yep.
And the thing is, they're backed. They're investor backed. I mean, it wasn't some dude. It's not some dude running around his pickup truck that's coming up with that. Because if you're talking about tying down 5,000 acres at a $50 per, you're talking about a significant amount of money, about $250,000 a year. This guy's got to come up with, and the first time he doesn't obligate it, then the guy tears up his contract and says, your payment didn't come through, so you're in breach of contract. So it's not that they're not backed. They are backed, probably with investor monies, right?
Right. Yeah. But the only thing that matters is that the project gets done, right? If you want to get the $1,000, $1,500, couple $1,000 an acre, you want the project to go through. And so you may ask these guys, well, how many of these have you done? And they'll say, well, we've got option on 50 farms right now. Yeah, but how many solar projects have you put up? Well, we don't have any of those done yet.
Yeah. And tell me about, let me go and see an actual solar farm, as they call them, solar field, that's actually cranking out kilowatts and putting them up on the grid. And then I want to talk to the landowner that is making the money off of that. And then if you can't do that, you say, be wary.
Exactly. Yep.
So you are in negotiations right now. How many acres are you going to put into a solar development for commercial, not for community and not for on-farm use?
We don't have anything currently under negotiation for commercial.
Oh.
Yep. So
Just for community,
and we have actually tried quite a few sites on the commercial, and it is really restrictive on these power lines that you have by there.
Yeah.
So that the line has to be big enough, and the demand has to be big enough, like the unfulfilled demand for the utility. And to get all those things to line up, you can start to see why the lease rates are so high, because it's really not a large number of areas that they can take advantage of.
Yeah, the reason the rates are where they are is because there's only a certain number of acres, as many acres as we have out here in the Indianas or the Illinois, whatever. But I was going to say, or the Illinois, but then people think I was mispronouncing the state's name. Anyway, so there's only so many acres that tee this up, where it's next to the grid, next to a power substation, and also has available acres.
Yeah, that's right. So, I think a couple of things you want to think of if you're getting into these negotiations, like we talked about, is who's behind it. I think that's probably the most important. And then they're going to want 20 years with a couple options for extension at their option that might get this thing to 30 or 35 years out there. So it can be super, super long term. So you want to think about escalators on this and how much more they need to be increasing their lease rate every year to keep up with inflation.
Yeah. Now that's one. My buddy that did this, John, he was talking about like a 1% annual bump. And I said, that sounded fine, or 2% annual bump. That sounded fine for the last 30 or 40 years when we had non-existent inflation. Well, anybody that's been to the grocery store lately, now granted, Kamala's going to take care of all this. She's going to fix prices just like they've done in Venezuela. It's been amazing for the grocery and food availability. But anyway, that's a different topic for a different day. It pains me, by the way, that I can't blame you for Kamala. I like to blame things on Illinois just in general as an Indiana guy. I can't blame Kamala on you. Anyway,
well, Obama may have something to do with it. So
I think Obama's
blame it on Illinois.
I'd say that Obama's fingerprints are all over the Kamala situation. But anyway, aside from price fixing and price controls on food, which has never worked out in the history of food or economics, aside from that, we're not going to. If you're getting only a 1 or 2% bump on your lease payment for solar, you have absolutely got a problem, because this inflation, I don't think, is tamed, and I don't think it's going away. So you're talking about you're losing. Now, granted, the number's really big. At $1,500 an acre, I'm already 5 times cash rent rate. Okay, so in 25 years, I'm only 3.5 times cash rent rate based on it not keeping up with inflation.
Yeah, so I think 1 or 2 is too low. I think 2.5 or 3 are better. And if you can get it tied to
actual
CPI or some inflation index, that's even better.
Right.
I don't know.
All right. So what else do I need to know? We talked a lot about on-farm, which I think if I'm a farm owner and I can use the electricity, grain setup, dairy setup, hog setup, anything really would apply. I mean, shop, right? Some of these farm operations have significant amounts of electrical demand. But a farm office, if it's tied to the shop, that counts.
That's fine.
Yeah, just it can't be residential.
Correct.
So unless you sleep in your office, it qualifies. Okay. So the easiest one to do, and this is regardless of jurisdiction, the pot's sweeter in Illinois, but in other states, if I'm in Nebraska, I should sure as hell look at on-farm solar development using these USDA programs, et cetera.
I think it's a lot better return than other things farmers spend money on. Yes.
There's no question. And then, and you said, then you get this tax credit, et cetera. Okay. Then we talked about community, which it was new to me. If you're next to a community that wants to go solar and you got the farm ground next to it, if you can get that deal struck, there's significant amounts of upside potential on income, and also same thing on tax credits there too, right?
Someone else is going to be owned by a developer or the community. So you will not get the tax credits.
Okay.
They're getting the tax credits, but that's why the lease rate's so high.
I see. So, but you get the income.
Passing that back to the farmer through the lease rate.
Yeah. So the community gets tax credits to go solar. You get, though, a significant amount of revenue.
Right. Exactly.
Okay. And then on putting it up for commercial development, so that's our third one, meaning tying to the grid. There's a lot of challenges, meaning you need to be close to the grid, close to a substation, need a certain amount of parameters, et cetera. You said be careful about speculators, get an actual developer, and then try to get your lease rate. By the way, the leases are not cookie cutter. Like you can negotiate, right? If you've got 160
you better be
acres,
negotiating. Yeah.
you've got 160 acres sitting next to a substation, next to a grid, and they come in and give you this cookie cutter. Here's our blanket lease. You can say, perfect. Now let's change line item 3, 4, and 5. And of course, you would go to your attorney if you're savvy and say, here's how we're going to negotiate this.
Right. You can say, here's our blanket lease that we use for these. So you're right. You want to be working with the right person, with the right company. You want to make sure you've got this escalator in there. You want to make sure that they are, if they don't pay, then you just get to take the solar over, right? You just own it, and it just becomes yours, and then you're selling the power off of it. You may want to have them bonded so that you can get for the cleanup at the end.
I would make sure, if it were me, I would make sure there's a bond in place for cleanup, because what the hell am I going to do with 160 acres of solar panels? Go out there with my Kubota and my fork, and my bale forks, and my bolt cutters. And I mean, I'm gonna be out there. Where do you take them? Where do I take solar panels when they're done? Right.
I think of the city cleanup day, right? When they have.
Yeah, right. I take it. I've got an old LP tank and an old laptop, and also 160 acres worth of solar panels that might have heavy metals in them. So can you please take them? Yeah, there's that. That's the big concern, right?
Yep, right.
All right. His name's John Carroll. We covered a lot of stuff. I like him being on here. Third time he's been on. Farming in Two Hemispheres. Talked about the thing with the Keller kid about right-of-way and eminent domain coming across your farm, and now we're talking about solar. So he'll be back. Unless he's in Brazil, tending to his other farming operation down there.
I'll keep reading farm magazines, come up with some new topics.
Well, I'll tell you what, you've got 14 hours of flying, so you've got lots of time to read solar, read about farm magazine. Any solar development in Brazil?
Yes, unsubsidized, and it is working down there. It has a.
You're using it on farm use?
Yeah, so we're doing our first one now for hogs. Yep,
that's fantastic. So the point is, you're enough of a fan, and we're not fans of some of the way it came about. But like you said, it's just like crop insurance or whatever. If the deal is there, if this is the game we're forced to play, we should play it. It's not even government subsidized in Brazil, and you're doing it.
That's right. The cost is, I mean, I hate to say it worked, but it seems like the government subsidies have incentivized solar panel production, which over time has dramatically lowered the cost of them. And now they're actually standing, they can stand on their own. And that's what.
Well, and it may have happened anyhow. I mean, the cost.
It may have happened anyhow. Yep.
I mean, the cost. Calculators are on your phone for free right now. And when I went to college, my calculator here, still on my desk from 1988, was like a $125 calculator. So technology, obviously, prices come down. But yeah, so you're doing solar in Brazil even without the subsidy.
Yep, that's correct.
Cool. Carroll Family Farms, Carthage, Illinois. John Carroll, a reader of farm magazines. One of the few people that still does that at the age of 42. What are you?
43.
43. Goodness sakes. All right. He's getting old. So am I. Anyway, thanks for being here. Till next time, check out Truterra for a sustainability program. Check out Redox for the bionutrients that can help your farming operation. And be sure to check also Pattern Ag. They've been a sponsor of mine for a long, long time. They're helping with predictive soil analytics to let you know if you have something like fusarium that's costing you yield. Go check out Pattern Ag. Till next time, thanks for being here, John Carroll.
All right. We'll talk to you later.
I hope so. And thank you for being here, dear listeners. It's a long one, but it's a very good one. This is an important topic that you're going to hear more about in the business of agriculture. And by the way, I'm Damian Mason, and this is the Business of Agriculture. Well, that concludes another fantastic episode of the Business of Agriculture. This episode was brought to you by Pattern Ag. Everybody in agriculture understands the importance of soil health. We also keep an eye on our soil better than we ever did through advanced soil testing. But what if there was a company that provided predictive analytics, not just checking out nutrients and all the elements that are in there, but also could tell you the degree of risk you face with disease and pest pressure?
That's right. Pattern Ag can do that. They actually can tell you, hey, you're going to have a real issue here. You can preemptively, proactively treat for corn rootworm or cyst nematode or sudden death syndrome before the problem actually starts costing you yield. Go to pattern.ag, that's www.pattern.ag, to find the nearest rep that can help you start doing better for your soil.